What's up, Archons? I'm Flightless Pheasant, and today we're going to get out our near future lens and take a look at some of the things that are coming in the future of Keyforge, specifically the Aember Skies set coming out later this year. So obvious spoilers ahead. You've been warned. But before we get into any of that, I'm a huge fan of Keyforge, and if you are too, then please like, subscribe, and hit the bell, as I'll be bringing you even more lore from Keyforge and the Crucible. So like I said, the topic of discussion today is going to be Aember Skies, specifically the preview cards that were sent out with the Grim Reminders game found about a month ago now. I'm going to go through all the preview cards I was able to find. Side note, I'm sure I didn't find all of them, but these are the ones that have been publicly shared that I could get my hands on. Some of them are signed by Richard Garfield, so if you see that, that's what's going on there. And because these are screenshots, the quality's going to vary a little bit. But most of what I'm interested in is looking at these cards through my perspective of the lore of Keyforge and what they mean in that regard. But I also want to do a little bit of theory crafting, as there is a new named mechanic, being stratoflight, that I want to throw my theory into the ring on how that one's going to work. And hey, maybe I'll turn out to be right. Who knows? But I want to hear what you guys think stratoflight is too, so when we get to that part, absolutely drop your theory down in the comments and let me know what you think is coming in the future of Keyforge. Our first card is Rainc's Furyheart. She's a 3-power Brobnar human with Skirmish that says before fight, exalt the creature Rainc's Furyheart fights. Her flavor text says her twin blades are known as Bestow and Behead. I like this card a lot, but in particular I like it because it's a Brobnar human. Only the second one we've ever had, the other being Flamewake Shaman. And even though in the lore, Brobnar is claimed to be a house that is welcoming to most others, and that there are a number of humans who are members, these are the only two we've seen so far. So I'm really excited to get Rainc's in there so that we can see some more humans among the warriors of Brobnar. Next is Brunx and Bongle, a 7-power Brobnar goblin giant that says after fight, if this is the first time this creature has been used this turn, you may ready it and reap with it. Its flavor text says, "Who's the brains of this operation?" I really like this card because it has two different traits referring to the two different creatures shown on it. It's a little like Siphonopterian in that way, where the insect trait refers to the mount and the knight trait refers to the rider. I'm actually really hoping we see more like this because it's kind of cool. Also, I love the way that I assume Bongle is riding on Brunx's back, on the back of his neck, so that he can cover his back. Very good. The next card is Bosch the Unyielding. He's a 5-power, 1-armor Brobnar giant with Taunt that says after an enemy creature is destroyed fighting this creature, fully heal this creature. I honestly believe this is one of the best taunt creatures we've ever seen. Like, any small fries that swing into him die and have no effect. He just gets back to full power. He's a little like Rothias the Fierce, but Rothias is still vulnerable to creatures with power 5 or greater. I mean, so's Bosch, but Bosch's vulnerability doesn't really start till 6. And sure, he only guards his own neighbors, and Loyal Packmate, for instance, could guard the whole board, but Loyal Packmate can be picked off by multiple small fights. There's really only one taunt creature I was able to find that is definitively better than Bosch, and that's Lady Lorena, who's 6 power with 3 armor and taunts 2 deep, not only her neighbors, but her neighbors' neighbors. This means that if you don't have at least 4 power, you can't even scratch her in the first place, and it takes a total of 9 to take her off the board. And not only that, but she's protecting 4 creatures in the meantime. Still, short of this particular creature, Bosch is going to be one of the best taunters we've ever seen, and at a common, he has a chance to really shake up the meta. And the last of our Brobnar preview cards is the action Incensed. It has an Amber Pip, and it says play for the remainder of the turn, each friendly Brobnar creature gets +3 power. I mean, this is just a really good Brobnar action. You can get a little more punch out of your fights, you can make your Bosch a little bit stronger so that he can recover his health without dying. I mean, I don't know, it just feels like this has a lot of utility. I'm looking forward to seeing this get played. Also, I want to imagine that incensed means that they're burning amber-infused incense to make themselves more furious, but I don't know. There's no evidence of that on the card. It just sounded funny to me. From House Brobnar, we move on to Dis, and we only have one preview card for Dis that I was able to find, and that is Slayer, a 3-power demon with Skirmish and Splash Attack 2 that says if there are no enemy creatures in play, destroy Slayer. Its flavor text says all fates are sealed. I actually find this card to be a little bit underwhelming, but at a common, I'm sure that Dis is doing lots of other things, and maybe they're just keeping it close to the vest for now. Still, not a bad demon, just a little small and kind of one note, in my opinion. From Dis, we move on to Aquidon. And in Aquidon, we have an action called Reap the Wild Wind that is a rare with Enhance 3 Amber pips, and it says each player reveals their hand. Each player gains Amber equal to the number of Amber bonus icons on their cards revealed this way. This is a really cool card, and it would be especially good if you have an opportunity to look at your opponent's hand, like with a Talent Scout or something like that, before you play it, so that you know how much Amber your opponent's going to get out of it. Alternatively, if you can make your opponent discard a bunch of cards before you play it, that too might generate you some additional value. I really think that this card is very Aquidon. You know, high risk, high reward, but if you have the right tools, you can mitigate the risk and maximize the reward. The next card we get is from House Aquidon, and it's called Scoline Booze, I think. Anyway, as you can see, this one is one of the ones signed by Richard Garfield, and the name's kind of covered up a little bit, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Scoline Booze. It's a 5-power Aquidon beast that has play/reap. You may put a creature card from your hand face up under Scoline Booze. It has destroyed, put each creature under Scoline Booze into play under your control, put Scoline Booze on top of your deck. So this is a really good effect, but there's two things I want to question about it. First is I'm pretty sure if Scoline Booze gets returned to your hand or purged or something like that, the creatures will go to your discard instead of play, which isn't too terrible, but something to keep in mind. And second is that the creatures are put into play, they are not played, which means you don't get any bonus pips or play effects that the creatures might have. So all in all, I'm not exactly sure how I feel about this card as to whether it's good or bad, but it's definitely interesting. It feels a little bit like Cauldron. It's one of those cards you got to keep an eye on, and if you let it go wild, it will go very wild. So just like Dis only had one card, Geistoid also only has one card. In this case, it's an action called A Ghost in the Sun. You gain an Amber from its Amber pip, and then it says play, put a creature into play from your discard pile. For each forged key your opponent has, put a creature into play from your discard pile. Again, this is a really good effect, but a little bit like Scoline Booze, these creatures are put into play, not played, and so again, no Amber bonus pips or play effects are going to be activated. I don't know how good I think this card is overall. It's one of those cards that scales better the later in the game you play it and the more behind you happen to be, but I think it's got a little bit of utility in that regard at the very least. Also, I do really love the art for this card. It looks really incredible. From Geistoid, we move into logos, and here's where things can get really interesting. So the first card we're going to look at is the one that has the little diamond with a circle in it that means it's a linked card. This is called Hollow Camo. It has an Amber pip, and it says Hollow Camo can only be attached to a skyship creature. While this creature is ready, it cannot be dealt damage. The flavor text says Biaxial Amplitude Dispersal Device is a more accurate, but it's not a good acronym. I like that because the acronym would be bad. BADD, good. I also think that this card will only appear in decks that have skyships, which makes sense. And I think that the skyships are going to tie in with stratoflight. Further, I think Hollow Camo is going to tie in with how I think stratoflight's going to work. So when we get there, I'll talk a little bit more about why I think that this is actually a really good effect. But just know for now that I actually think Hollow Camo is supposed to tie in with stratoflight and that most skyships are going to have stratoflight. So the next card is a Logos Uncommon creature called De-Animator. It's a 3-power cyborg scientist with elusive that has play/after reap, put a mineralize counter on a creature. While a card has a mineralize counter, it is an artifact with the text action destroy this card. While it is an artifact, it is not on the battle line. So I like this creature. It kind of feels like the opposite of Animator, which was an artifact that turns other artifacts into creatures. Now we have De-Animator, a creature that turns other creatures into artifacts. It's a really nice sort of balance there. But there is one thing I want to point out about this creature, and that is that his play effect is not optional, which means if you play him on an empty board, he turns himself into an artifact, which is very unfortunate. Alright, now we've come to the card that is the topic of everyone's discussion. This is Quantum Compass. It has an Amber Pip, and it's a Logos artifact with the item trait that says Omni, choose a house. Until the end of the turn, each creature of the chosen house gains stratoflight. But there's no text to tell us how stratoflight works, so we're all left to speculate. So here's my take on how I think stratoflight's going to work. I believe that stratoflight is going to be a keyworded ability that makes it so that a creature can only fight or be fought by other creatures with stratoflight, making it a sort of defensive ability that has the downside of keeping you from being able to use it to destroy your opponent's battle line unless that battle line also has stratoflight. With the sort of idea being that these creatures are going to be way up in the stratosphere, and thus much too high to interfere with the main battle line. But if that is the case, then Quantum Compass would be quite good. You could use it offensively in one of two ways. Either to give your opponent's creatures stratoflight, so that your creatures with stratoflight can fight them, or giving your creatures stratoflight, so that you can fight your opponent's creatures that already have it. I think that would be pretty good. It would also mean that Hollow Camo could suddenly make a stratoflight creature undamageable during your opponent's turn, unless they have a way to exhaust it first. Because remember, Hollow Camo says that while the creature is ready, it cannot be dealt damage, which would also protect it from incidental damages beyond just fight damage. I'm reasonably confident that this is how this is going to end up working, because it just fits together really well. But if you have a different theory about how stratoflight's going to work, go ahead and put it down in the comments, because I'm really interested to hear what you guys think on this one. Alright, so that's the speculative ability that's coming out in the Aember Skies set. Now here's the one we know how it works that everyone's been talking about. The only card we got previewed out of House Mars is called Nice to Greet You. It's a Martian action that has Enhance House Mars. It explains that a non-Mars card in this deck has been given the Mars house affiliation in addition to its original house. Which is crazy. You're basically putting a house pip on a card and making that card a 13th card in the house that it was enhanced into, which makes that house more valuable than any of your others, which is really interesting. Additionally, this card doesn't just enhance another card to be part of House Mars, it also has the effect play Ready Each Mars Creature, which is solid in Mars to begin with, even without adding a potential another creature from a different house into House Mars. I do have one minor gripe with this card, and it's a lore gripe. I really just don't understand how Mars would be okay with this. Mars as a house is an incredibly insular and isolationist faction, and I really don't see them willingly letting other people into their house, unless it's a trick, or a trap, or they plan on killing them or throwing them in pits, or feeding them to their beasts, or something like that, in which case I feel really sorry for this guy. Alright, and our last two cards come from the new house, Skyborn. It seems like an appropriate place to end this. So, the first one is an action called Against All Flags. It says, play, for the remainder of the turn, each friendly Skyborn creature gains after fight, steal 1 amber. That's a pretty good effect, depending on how fighty House Skyborn turns out to be, or how many of them have skirmish, or things like that. I don't know, I like House Brobnar, and this would be an effect I would love to have in Brobnar, although it's not very flavorful for them. And it gives off a very Sky Pirate aesthetic, which is what I was hoping from House Skyborn. Still, without seeing more of the house, it's a little hard to know how good or bad this is going to turn out to be, but I really like this card. It just looks piratey. Next, we have the Skyborn action card, Seeker Missiles. This is a really straightforward card. Gain an amber, deal 5 damage to a creature. This is basically Stomp, but I don't have to exalt one of my creatures if I kill something. Honestly, I think it's the best targeted removal action we've ever seen, and I'm really looking forward to firing off some missiles at my opponent's most problematic creatures. And the last card we're going to talk about is a creature from House Skyborn called Indigo Halyard. He's a 5-power pirate that says while your blue key is forged, Indigo Halyard gains After Reap, ready and fight with a friendly creature. And he also says while your opponent's blue key is forged, each of Indigo Halyard's neighbors gain Taunt. So clearly this is the blue key equivalent of the Red Baron, who I'm certain will also end up in House Skyborn. And if you've got the red key guy and the blue key guy, I'm really hoping we get a yellow key guy. And at that point, if you can get all three in the same deck, that would just be tremendous. In fact, if these happen to be linked cards, a little bit like the clocks, it would be really, really cool. But at the same time, it might kind of be nice if they weren't necessarily linked and you could kind of just get one or more of them in different decks. Still, I'm really looking forward to this. It's finally going to make key colors matter, and maybe the rest of the set will care about it too, who knows. But I'm just glad to see that the Red Baron is no longer alone, and has a new friend who cares about our blue keys as well. And that's it. That's all of the Aember Skies preview cards we have so far. I'm sure more spoilers are on the way, particularly once the GameFound launches in April, but for now, this is what we have. So tell me what you think. Are there any cards you're particularly excited for? Are there new mechanics that you think are going to be particularly good? Do you think my opinion on stratoflight is correct? Do you have a theory of your own? Put it down in the comments and let's start a discussion on this one, because it's always fun to speculate about what's coming in the future. That's really all I have for you today, though, so until next time, later, Archons.